I learned a ton over those first 4 years of my career, and did a little bit of character design, and then was the art director on Zim. So I was for the second season. So I had like working with designers and generating some on my own, like and seeing it come back in animation, seeing what works, what doesn't, that's part of it too. So when I got to Avatar, on Zim, I was getting back into anime, and so I was really inspired by what I was seeing with like Furikuri and Cowboy Bebop.
Okay.
So when we started Avatar, the initial idea was not, let's do an anime inspired show. That came very soon after, but it wasn't the like inception of the idea. It was just responding to a prompt from Eric Coleman for what Nickelodeon was looking for at that time. Once we realized, martial arts, we were like, well, let's make, we wanted it to sort of be inspired by Asian cinema and traditional Asian martial arts. And then we were like, why don't we make it an anime show? And here was our idea. This was our reasoning.
Okay.
I was particularly inspired by that stuff at that time, but we thought, let's pick a style that's established. That way it'll be easier for people to draw. Because I was working on Zim, which was really, really cool design, but people had such a hard time drawing that style because it was idiosyncratic. It was out of nowhere. It was just Jonen's style.
Yeah.
And no one knew how to draw it.
Right.
Like the crew had a hard time with it. I am a kind of an adaptable artist. That's if I have a skill, it's that I can adapt. I don't really have like a strong, like, this is my style.
My style, yeah.
But that can be very good in animation because you get these jobs that are 6 months to 2 years.
Swiss Army knife.
You've got to switch to a different style. American, Western shows, typically very often it's just some totally like idiosyncratic style that just came out of nowhere. It's just someone's thing. Whereas there's this ongoing tradition. Now, to say anime, I mean, there's a huge spectrum of styles, but you can kind of pick a neighborhood and hang out in it.
Right.
So that was our thought. This has not panned out. I can tell you 20 years later, it's a more complicated style for people because it often involves, you need to know anatomy really well. It's not cartoony. It's actually just streamlined, realistic anatomy.
Right.
And a lot of people go into animation because they're like, I don't want to deal with that stuff. Like, I'm not trying to be
Give me a couple circles.
I'm going to do a Simpsons or a Flintstone guy.
Where are the beans and the tubes and
Exactly.
And then the other thing was, especially in 2002, things are different now, but in 2002, here in Southern California, anime was gaining in popularity, but it was still pretty niche. And
super niche.
People, especially in animation, might be into it, but finding people who were proficient in drawing that style was next to impossible here. And then we ran into all this stuff. Oh, well, we'll work with the studios who do this animation, and at that time, the Japanese studios were not interested in working with, and we could do a 12 series
they were like,
podcast
no,
about that.
We're good.
I have a lot of things to discuss about that, but we won't get into that now.
See you then. See you for
so,
that special.
The more traditional route is for U.S. studios is working with Korean animation studios, and there are many Korean studios that work with the Japanese studios. So we're like, oh, we'll work with them because they work with the Japanese artists doing these styles. And they are like, yeah, but those artists, we have them to work on the Japanese stuff. We're not giving you those artists.
Got it.
So we ran into that a lot. And,
oh my goodness.
And then it's, it's a more difficult style for a lot of people, even if they are familiar with it. It's just, again, there's a level of sophistication because the clothing is actually quite naturalistic, the way it folds, the way it flows. Hair is
everything. Hair is everything.
It's not just style. So then you start to see why maybe characters have spiky hair and blah, blah, blah. So that was how we ended up there. Here's the other thing. I was not proficient in the style either. But again, I can adapt. I'm pretty adaptable.
Totally.
But I've said this before, I was really aware of not wanting to just copy. Like, sure, I loved Furikuri and I had the whatever books I could get on it at the time. But I was like, if we just copy that, like, we're just counterfeits.
Right.
Yeah.
We're just even if it would look better, it would look cooler, slicker, more stylish, more legit. I was like, that's just not authentic. That didn't seem to be coming from the heart and and we wanted to very clearly be inspired by anime, but I was really conscious about not just lifting some pre-existing style. So that sort of contradicts what I was saying. I was like, we wanted to stay in that neighborhood, but I thought, I'm going to do my spin on it.
Totally.
Sure.
And there are things, I can tell you, looking back, there are choices I made that I'm just like could have copied a little more. You know, like could have made this a little better. And then there's one
design-wise or story-wise?
Yeah, style-wise.
Style-wise.
Like overall. But the number one thing that I regret on Avatar: The Last Airbender, we changed this on Korra, but is the size of their heads compared to the rest of their bodies.
Bigger or smaller? What are we talking about?
I wanted to go. I'm not trying to throw Mike under the bus. This was just the discussion back then.
Here we go.
No. Mike was used to bigger head because he had been out here working in animation in the U.S. in Southern California longer than I had because he was 2 years ahead of me. I think he was used to bigger headed characters.
Okay.
And if you look, like I was doing all these analyses of like Furikuri and stuff, and like you look at like Cowboy Bebop, they are many heads tall. Like they are really like Spike is like a lanky,
very lanky.
His head is tiny compared to his body, and that was not common in most American animation at the time. And when I did a breakdown of like the Furikuri proportions, like Naota, I don't know, I think he's like 14. So he wasn't too much older than Aang.
Mm-hmm.
And I did like a version of my style, but in that height. And Mike's like, it's just he looks too old, you know? And so I'm not putting it all on Mike, but we were sort of like, okay, we're going to make the heads bigger
heads.
And I want to be clear, there was a version with the bigger head that would have looked better that I wouldn't regret.
Right.
I just didn't know how to kind of dial it all in and get it to look good. So when I watch the old show or I look at the old model sheets, I mean, I am just cringing.
It's big heads.
You always talk about
it. It is so
It's
hard.
When did the heads start getting smaller?
I mean, the thing is, JM Animation, they tended to shift the proportions more towards anime. And because each studio we worked with 3 studios on the show, and each studio had their own sort of ways of interpreting the model sheets.
Yeah.
And the JM versions were definitely better.
So they sort of made the adaptation in a sense without you even knowing or planning that.
Yeah, so there are examples in the show that look good. If you flip to the model sheet, like Shinfu, I just saw Shinfu's model sheet the other day. I mean, it looks like someone scaled his lower body down like 40%. He's got these long,
it's
but
funny.
He has these long arms.
I've never thought about head size, and I'm thinking about other characters I have played. Think about some other characters you played in American animation. They got big heads.
Yeah.
Well,
they're all
big
headed.
Like Chibi and like, you know, so much merchandise. Like we continue to blow their heads up.
We just like the bigger heads.
Bigger,
Americans like big heads.
But let me be this goes further than that. So I regret it, and I do think there was a better version of it than I did. That's why I want to be really clear. Right. I'm not trying to throw Mike under the bus.
No throwing Mike DiMartino under the bus.
I was the art director. Ultimately, it was up to me to make it look good. And I was the primary character designer in the early developmental stages.
It's Brian's fault, you guys. I'm gonna say that in the camera right now.
But despite my reservations, my regrets, and how I look at it, this is kind of why I made the choice. I was aware that there were slicker, more stylish anime looking shows out there at the time. And I was like, I don't want this to be too slick. I don't want it to look too flashy.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that's why I didn't mind sort of injecting my kind of like awkward, less fashionable version into it.
Yeah.
And I actually think that the awkwardness and the less slick look has added to its charm. And I think it makes it a little more approachable for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Whereas some shows that are, some anime shows that are gorgeous, it's so slick that I think it's almost like high fashion. It keeps people out.
I see that.
Totally.
So,
but there are moments, that being said, there are moments in Avatar where we get to some real anime, like
we were trying.
high level stuff. We're like, oh, they're going for it. Oh, they went for it.
Yeah.
And then in Korra, we very deliberately, day one, I was like, their heads are going to be smaller.
Small heads.
They're going to be taller. And we did that.
Taller, smaller heads.
But here's where we come back to the character design being part of the tone and the storytelling. It changed the tone. And we were aware we were actually going for a bit older of a show and a little more adult, a little darker. In some cases, a lot darker. And it's less goofy. It's less,
100%.
It's less approachable. It is a little sleeker and sexier, and it's just like, okay, so it's an interesting balance. And I would I just go back and give Korra proportions on Avatar? No, but there's things I would do differently. But at the end of the day, it's like, we've been editing it for the symphonic concert, and especially book one. It's really hard for me to watch.
The big heads,
and it's like the awkward.
No, but you're critical of the
but
martial arts animation.
I think some parts are fun.
All of it. But at the same time, I have to recognize it still connects.
Oh, it's
of course
so
with a lot of
special.
people, and so
special.
Those are important things to keep in mind. I think as artists and designers is sleeker and fancier and more stylish. It actually isn't always the answer. Sometimes it's good to have a little bit of kind of goofy.
I also gonna point out
awkward charm in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mike's not here, and myself being a bigger headed person, skull wise,
he does have a bigger head
think
than
me
I do.
and Mike have bigger heads than you have. A smaller head.
It's medium.
So I just want to point that I don't know if that has anything to do with design. I'm just putting it out there.
Interesting.
I'm putting myself in the bigger head.
Give yourself a bigger head.
Yeah,
in animation as well.
Well, I may just have a bigger head.
I was just, Mike is so sick of hearing me whine about this, but it's been interesting for me because actually there are some shows. I'm trying to think, even some more recent productions out of Japan that I've really enjoyed. And I'm like, they actually kind of have quite big heads, but it's like they did a better
this is dinner conversation between you and Mike.
They did a better job of the neck length and the shoulder width than I did, and I'm just, these are the things that keep me awake at night.
Bend your ear for ad-free episodes with Avatar: Braving the Elements Premium.
Subscribe today on Apple Podcasts.